Am I blue? Lying in bed one autumn night a few years back, I decided that I would call upon the council for a bit of help with a little health crisis I was struggling with. The who? Allow me to introduce you. In December of 1991, I was involved in a 75-mile-per-hour T-bone collision in which I had a near-death experience that irrefutably changed my life forever. After being greeted by two beings of light, guardians, who had been with me since the dawn of my creation, I was able to experience an inconceivable review of my 21 years that I'd just left behind, resulting in my own decision to return to life as Mary Helen. I was clearly informed that I would go back with an upgrade, enhanced if you will, able to connect with information that could potentially change the stakes in the life experiences of other human beings. I communed with the dead, and I use that term loosely, for all of my life. I was told that in addition to seeing, feeling, and dreaming things before they happened, I would have the ability to gather the information stored in the cellular core and ethereal body of an individual. In essence, by temporarily reconvening with the higher vibration found outside of the earthly realm, I returned with an uncanny ability to access these higher vibrations at will in order to extract energy and information to assist other human beings facing crises of a physical, emotional, or spiritual nature. With this knowledge came a promise. I was assured that I would not be left to do this on my own. There would be assistance, guidance in the most tangible way, and all would reveal itself in good time. The council has been with me for as long as I can remember. The communication started as voices, very distinct voices, not like schizophrenic type voices wrecking my head at all hours of the day and night, but clear, precise, and discerning words of wisdom and information that I otherwise would not be privy to without their assistance. These voices were different than those I'd always heard, the ones belonging to the spirits of people who had once walked the earth in human form, now physically deceased. Those communications are more like impressions, giving factual information of things that have been, things pertaining to their experiences and interactions while on earth, in addition to insights as to what they are encountering beyond the veil. The other voices, those belonging to the council, give me information relative to other people's stories, to me, to my teachings and healing sessions, to world events, past, present, and future. Sometime during my mid to late 20s, I consciously made the request that the voices show themselves. That first interaction is branded on my mind for all eternity. In the most sensational excursion of astral travel or being out of body, I found myself, my true self, in a space that gave the appearance of a large room. The truly curious thing was that the room seemed to breathe, giving the feeling of enclosure, but there were no walls. There before me were 9 of the most unusual, magnificent beings I could have ever imagined. In all of my visits to follow, there would be 12. They certainly don't look like us. I likened my first meeting with the council to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed European seeing the tanned, reddish hue and dark silky hair of a Native American for the first time. Or picture an African who's only ever known her own kind, with ebony skin and ivory white teeth, first encountering the pale, yellowish skin and almond-shaped eyes of someone of Asian descent. There was recognition of similarity, yet we were different. Each being was contrasting in color, skin tone, features, and manner of attire. Whether this was for my benefit or not, I'm still not sure. Somehow clothing seemed unnecessary, yet most of them wore some kind of covering. The one who struck me the most was feminine in nature, her skin the most alluring shade of pale blue, a periwinkle of sorts, with unusual markings that looked like intricate tattoo art. It was with this lovely life form that I felt an immediate kinship, as if I knew her homeland, and knew that we shared something that I didn't necessarily feel when looking at the other members of this assembly. Each of the 9 was obviously from a different locale, and all were easy to distinguish as male or female. It wasn't until I later met the final 3 that I grasped the true meaning of androgynous. These beautiful entities simply were. There was a vibration and a sense of wisdom about them that made it impossible for me to label them as either male or female. They did somehow appear to be of the same origin as the exquisite being of blue I had such a resonance with when I'd first met the other 9 members. In my mind, I was aware that each representative had their own indigenous forms of communication, Some spoke telepathically, others communicated with an audible form of frequency pitch, and the others through some type of mouth-like orifice. Again, I think this was somehow for my benefit, not particularly out of necessity. They were loving in nature, yet serious in their thoughts and words, much like parents giving firm guidance to a child. They clarified that they'd been providing me with information outside of the five senses since my birth. They also expressed that they had watched me grow, having to accept on more than one occasion that I might not find my way back to my chosen path this lifetime. If I hadn't, there would be others to fill the space until I remembered, in this life or perhaps another. I was by no means the only one they watched. Apparently, I was part of some sort of team. Did you cause my accident? My first question was greeted with warmth and understanding. No, you did. You reached deep into your core and rediscovered your purpose. We only obliged your request for immediate change. Whoa! It took a moment for me to get my head around the idea that I had requested such a bold intervention. The plan had been that if I had not managed to decipher my path and utilize the gifts with which I had incarnated, using my own free will, this accident would provide an opportunity for me to remember once I'd reached adulthood. I was speechless, but in my heart, I knew it was so. The first meeting in itself seemed to last a lifetime. In truth, it was only one night by my clock. From that day forward, the voices now had faces. I was certainly accustomed to being at their beck and call, filled with impromptu knowledge that always seemed to be able to help sort out other people's problems. Why couldn't they help me with mine? I never wanted to abuse or take advantage of this line of communication. And yes, I was dedicated to a life of service, but I was really finding it difficult to focus and stay clear for others because physically, I felt so awful myself. Pain I was accustomed to, in my back, my head. I'd grown strangely familiar with the bodily fallout from the accident as the years had passed. The broken neck, the migraines, the hearing loss, dysfunctional swallow, the lingering effects of encephalitis, the distorted rib cage, the contorted pelvis, not to mention a list of allergies and sensitivities a mile long that had developed overnight after the accident. But recently, I had constant cramping, all-day nausea, not to mention a diet that had dwindled down to mashed avocado and rice. It was becoming more than I could handle. I needed help, and I needed it fast. Ask and ye shall receive, right? I couldn't tell you what time it was. The children had long been asleep. I was drifting somewhere between REM and my old pal insomnia when I sensed that I wasn't alone. I can't say I was afraid, but I was most definitely startled. Standing next to my bed were two beings, solid in form. They were certainly not like spirits. They were the same pale blue, the periwinkle, as the kindred blue female member of the council I previously described. Only these two had no markings. In fact, there was no nothing. Not a hair on their heads, nor anywhere else on their bodies. They were smooth and they were perfect. The beings were what I would call humanoid. They looked like us, only they didn't. At least 6.5 to 7 feet in height, their cranial and facial features were like ours, yet slightly larger, and in proportion with the rest of their bodies. Picture the motivational speaker Tony Robbins, hairless and periwinkle. That was them. They communicated in silence, through thought, and it was then that I knew that they had been sent in answer to my request. Nothing like this had ever happened before. In truth, I had never asked for assistance this way. They informed me that we were going to take a little trip, but first, I would have to be prepared for travel because of the density of my human body. Were they calling me fat? I didn't like the sound of that, but I also didn't have too much time to think about it. The next thing I felt was a distinct prick on the inside of my knee, as well as between my thumb and my first finger. I'd experienced markings like this as a child and in my teens all throughout my life. Now, as an adult, many markings would follow. The world suddenly accelerated, and I was out of my body. No time seemed to pass, and there was no real sense of travel, just a whoosh at departure and immediate arrival. There before me was the most spectacular waterfall I've ever seen, in person or in photographs. The spray of water was cool against the balmy air, casting a magnificent rainbow the full length of the falls. Where in the world was I? It looked like a tropical paradise, so lush and vibrant, The place felt alive, like it was breathing in the same fresh air as me. Unspoiled by human hands, I wasn't too sure if I was somewhere that humans had ever been before. Yet, I appeared to be in my own body still. Yes, this is your planet. They were reading my thoughts. You know this place as Micronesia. My two companions then drew my attention to a particular flower growing all around the falls. What does this look like to you? They were kind as they questioned me. Well, the flower looks like it has whiskers, I replied, like a child lost in some kind of fantasy. Remember this. Whoosh, we were gone. The next stop wasn't so pleasant. Definitely on planet Earth, I knew that we were now in a shanty town somewhere in an impoverished African country. This time there were people. The surroundings felt unsafe, and even though I somehow knew I was in good hands, I was sitting on the dirt, leaning against a temporary structure, and there next to me was a dark-skinned man that in my mind I can still see as plain as day to this day. He wore filthy cut-off jeans and what used to be a long-sleeve yellow checkered shirt with the sleeves torn off just above the elbows. He was out of it, completely strung out on something, the color of dark urine where the whites of his eyes should have been. Before I could ask what was going on, one of my two companions placed what looked like a piece of large litmus paper on the ground, about the size of a floor tile. He produced a tiny vial of liquid, and he placed a drop on the paper, instantly soaking the entire sheet. The second being snatched the unsuspecting fellow off the ground, standing him upright, and then planted his foul-looking bare feet directly on the paper. In a split second, the parchment turned black, while the man let out a moan, not of pain, but of panic. Absolutely no one seemed to see us. He would have appeared like a puppet on strings to those around him. Holding the man by the shoulders, the blue being sharply turned him towards me. The whites of his eyes now sparkled, and his pupils were no longer dilated. His body was soaked in sweat. Whoosh! I don't remember waking up. In fact, I don't recall having ever slept so well. The following morning, as I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, I began to recount the most outlandish dream I'd ever had in my life. The girls were now awake, and it was time to get ready for work and school. I went to the toilet, brushed my teeth, and then took off my t-shirt on the way to the shower. It was my hand that I noticed first. Between my thumb and first finger were two identical marks. It looked as if I'd had two needle punctures or bee stings, already healed over. I was nearly afraid to look down. There, on the inside of my knee, next to a rather large bruise in the shape of a thumbprint, were two more marks, the very same ones that I had on my hand. I stepped back out of the shower and sat on the edge of the bath, not sure if I would faint, get sick, scream, or cry out. I began to laugh. That's what I do when I get nervous. A bit shaken, I went straight back into my room and grabbed my phone, taking a photo of my hand and the inside of my knee, because surely to God, the minute I tried to show the marks to someone, they would have mysteriously vanished. After dropping the girls to school, I went into work and was greeted by my office manager, Maureen, cheerful as ever. "The little pale face of you, what happened?" After years by my side, she knew the look. I hardly knew what to say. But the very best part of my relationship with Maureen is that I can start any sentence with something off the cuff like, "Okay, so you know the council." And there was no need to explain. She had been witness to or heard about pretty much everything that had ever happened to me in the last decade. Maureen listened intently, not getting overly excited, because with all she had seen, it would take something out of this world to spook her. I finished the story, and then I showed her the marks. This was the first time I ever saw her visibly shaken. In between patients, we tried to come up with every possible scenario. The most plausible was that my subconscious mind was trying to help me solve my own problems. Congruent with the possible dream I had created, maybe I somehow managed to mark myself by manifesting the pinpricks as hives or pimples, or it was far-fetched and we knew it, but it was the best we could come up with. During lunch, I began to Google waterfalls in Micronesia. Where was that? They said I would know it as Micronesia. These two obviously had not been following me through my entire life, or they would know that I am terrible at geography. This place was unique, so distinct. I knew that if I saw it, I'd recognize it. The rainbow mist was unforgettable, so it didn't take long before I was staring at it, right in front of me, on the screen. Metal El Lichid, in the state of Nagadma, the highest and largest waterfall on the island of Palua, located in the Pacific approximately 800 km east of the Philippines and 800 km north of Papua New Guinea. This wasn't the first time I'd been directed to this part of the world by the council, I quickly realized. About a year earlier, there was a vision. I'm still not so sure that I wouldn't like to forget it. In the midst of conversation with the elder beings, I was shown images of a world map following the next round of dramatic earth changes. Anyone who knows me knows I can't stand that kind of stuff. Call it scars or cellular memory, catastrophophobia, whatever you like. I don't like anything to do with cataclysmic world events. It's too raw when you harbor the detailed memory of flashing asteroids, volcanic explosions, and a great wall of water just over 13,500 years ago. I don't even know if the council was simply sharing information, attempting to quell my fears, or giving me knowledge that would be relevant in years to come. But there was a map, and while some of it was recognizable, there were some pretty heavy-duty changes to our planet coming up. Now, the interesting component, and I suppose the part that left me feeling a bit calmer about the whole thing, was that I was shown via previews of my children's future lifetimes as to how gradual the changes would be. They were rapid in the grand scheme, but not Hollywood apocalyptic style. The change, for the most part, gave rise to the opportunity for people to migrate away from continuous flooding and shifts in the land. Some of the changes would be devastating, but overall, we would certainly survive it as a species. Very clearly, the council made references to a place on an island I had certainly never come across in my studies. Again, not so far from Papua New Guinea is an island known as New Britain. I was shown a dormant volcano in a mountain range the council referred to as Sulu. Sometime within my lifetime, it would no longer be a sleeping giant. This would trigger a series of events that would set Mother Earth in motion for yet another massive clear-out. Once again, I found myself revisiting this corner of the world, this time in hopes that I would stumble across the true meaning of my visit from the Blue Men. I then recalled the plant with the whiskers. Remember this, one of the Blue Men had impressed in my mind. A quick Google search and I had the plant in question. Orthosiphon aristatus, also known as cat whiskers, is a bluish-white flower native to several regions in the southern hemisphere. I must have been gasping aloud because Maureen was now standing over my shoulder, watching as I pulled up more information about the plant that had been the focal point of the previous night's sojourn. Maureen, you're not going to believe this. She chuckled, and frankly, so did I, because neither of us could actually count the number of times I've started a sentence with, Maureen, you're not going to believe this. Also known as Java tea, cat whiskers tea is used amongst herbalists for purifying the blood, as an intense diuretic, as well as to treat diseases of the gallbladder, kidneys, and urinary bladder. A big, fat, rapid detox is what it was. Now I understood. The small vial of fluid that the Blue Men had used to saturate the litmus paper in the shanty town in Africa was a concentrated, liquidized dose of this potent herb. It also appeared that the leaves of this plant contained an unusually high quality and quantity of potassium salts. I was out the door and down to my local health food shop, Au Natural, in 2 seconds flat. My friend Susan Coleman is one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met in the field of herbal and natural remedies. She would either know about it already or quickly find out how to get the tea if she wasn't familiar with it. A few flicks through her catalog and she located a source. Get me as many boxes as you can. I was excited. The council was obviously putting me on a detox program. When I returned to the office, Maureen and I continued to try and make sense of it all. The conclusion we came to was that we really weren't sure what actually happened. Did I see the Blue Men? Yes. Did I feel the pricks in my hand and my knee just before some part of me journeyed to 2 different locations far removed from my bedroom? Yes. When I awakened, did we actually see the marks in the exact spots that I'd felt them? Yes. Did the foreign locations in the plant I was shown actually exist? Yes. And most fascinating, the medicinal use of the plant was in direct correlation to my current health crisis. Maureen and I agreed. Far be it from us to say the beings weren't real or it didn't really happen. We were both also open to the possibility that my own subconscious mind had created the scenario, marks included, that would lead me to the information that would eventually help me help myself. Conclusion? There was only one way to find out. After less than 2 weeks of taking around 6 cups a day, the excruciating cramps, the bloating, the belching, horrendous gas all stopped. The awful grip in the chest that felt like one continuous heart attack also ceased. My gut and I will be forever grateful to the council, the Blue Men, or the release of some deeply ingrained collective conscious memory of the effects of this plant on a human body dealing with gastroesophageal reflux disease and diverticulitis. I have since shared this remedy with countless others who've also had lasting results. This little morsel of material nearly wound up in the recycle bin, but I made an executive decision. You can do that when you're writing stories from your own life. I decided that there was no way I could leave it out following an interesting conversation that took place in my office not long after. My very dear friend Karen had called by the office for a chat. As we were catching one another up on the news of our lives, Karen asked how the book was coming along. You're going to love this one, Karen. I'm revealing some of my favorite covert operations. Thinking that she would react with pure excitement, instead, she questioned me. Which ones? Well, I'm finally going to talk about the council. Okay, and I'm telling about the Blue Men. Karen thought for a moment, then asked very seriously, do you really think that's a good idea? Curious to know the reason behind her comment, I pressed for an explanation. Karen is someone I value for her honesty, truthfulness, and genuine concern when sharing her opinion. A vivacious, bubbly blonde with legs up to her neck, she's a great talker, but she's equally a great listener. I love our chats, her passion, and her inquisitive, open mind. I respect her opinion, so when she queried my decision to include the visit from the Blue Men, I genuinely took her concerns on board. She had no problem with the story itself. In fact, she loved that stuff. Her issue was surrounding the fact that I had put so much effort into establishing myself as a reputable doctor and healer. People who might really benefit from my work or my writing might be turned off by something as out there as the beings from another realm. A belief in them was one thing, but an up-close and personal appearance, I completely understood where she was coming from. Her forthright approach, as well as her ability to express a diplomatic opinion, was from the heart and always with my best interest in mind. Without making light of her interest in my welfare, I pointed to the cross that Karen wore around her neck. This symbol represented a story that for some who may have never heard it, and even for those who had, could seem as outrageous as any myth, legend, or Blue Men. She'd grown up with it as an account of She had grown up with this account of a period in history as part of her culture. It had become a personal truth. So to Karen and many like her, there was nothing difficult about it at all. A virgin birth, foretold by prophets, to a mortal woman impregnated by a god, heralded by angelic beings from a heavenly realm. The mystical pregnancy produced a gifted, mysterious child who incidentally was tracked down by 3 very wise men via a unique planetary alignment. History quickly lost track of the major portion of this avatar's life, only to see him reemerge as a grown man, a healer, a prophet, the son of the one true God. This man taught the way, the truth, the light, converting godless heathens into fishers of men in just a few short years that we're told of. There were miraculous feats of healing and the controlling of nature itself, a promise of everlasting life, secured by a belief that this God incarnate sacrificed his life for the sins of all mankind. Not only was he resurrected from the dead, he appeared to be living, eventually ascending into the heavens above to take his place next to the throne of God, the Father Almighty, for all eternity. I explained to Karen that it was important to me that I not share a narrative that would make people comfortable, but that I would tell what actually happened to me, because in my numerous sessions over the years, a good few have had experiences with extraterrestrial encounters. From the first day I put pen to paper, I made a personal vow of authenticity to keep it real. There are many subjects that I covered in my first book, Promised by Heaven, that I have been told brought great comfort as well as an alternate perspective about life as we know it to my readers. There are also a number of topics I've written about that I know for a fact have made a few people squirm. To leave out the fact that to leave out the uneasy bits, to forget the one night I drank too much, resulting in my inability to defend myself from rape as a teen, that I had 2 children out of wedlock, that I had multiple businesses that went bust, That after my partner fled the country, leaving me alone to raise 2 small children, I got stung with a stack of bills that would sink a small country. That I allowed my own self-pity to contribute to the creation of a tumor in my breast, not once, twice. That I have a string of romances that never quite worked out. To leave any of that out, while in turn telling about the incredible visions, the awesome premonitions, the near-death experiences, the fascinating psychic activity, the privilege of communication with those in spirit, or the countless mind-blowing healing sessions, would be simply sensational, selective, and inauthentic. Everything that I've ever written for you is my truth. When the subject matter has been out there, even hard for me to digest sometimes, I've tried to give the most accurate interpretation in addition to any other plausible explanations whenever possible. My sole mission is to create the opportunity for a different view on life through my own adventures as a human thus far. I aim to remind people to grab their lives by the you-know-what and drain every last drop out of all experiences. The events of my life have completely and permanently altered my opinion of me and my fellow man. My story is one of faith. My current beliefs barely resemble those with which I was raised. They've expanded, they're all-inclusive, and lack the judgment necessary to be a card-carrying member of any organized religion. Let's face it, history tells a gruesome tale of the consequences for those who do not believe in the same God worshipped by whoever holds the power or the money. We are slowly evolving, and religious institutions based on fear and guilt are crumbling all around us. The one constant that prevails is the message of love. Love of self, our fellow brothers and sisters in this world and beyond, and the source from which we all originate. I feel that as we discover more about what's really happened in our past, catastrophically, geologically, and through the evolution and possible enhancement of our species, the state of tremendous fear that we live in will begin to shift. We are a world that is always waiting for the shoe to drop. We are already in the moment that so many are waiting for. As my cousin Nikki, an extremely gifted healer from the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, would say in a southern accent as thick as blackstrap molasses, "That shoe done dropped, people." I thank my friend Karen because her gumption to question me made me realize just how important it is that we listen objectively to every story and view the human experience from as many possible angles as we can. Question everything. Restore the elderly to the elders they once were, while supporting the work of the brilliant young minds that are currently incarnate and capable of innovative ideas that can further advance our fledgling species. Faith is not a synonym for foolish, nor does faith require that we blindly walk through life, too afraid to raise our hands and ask the really essential questions. Faith can move mountains. So can bulldozers. A little of both is called evolution. And I wanted to share that story with you because I'm really excited for a couple of reasons. Let me show you this. One of my readers was so taken by the story about the blue men and the waterfalls that I just received this painting in the post. Thank you, Angela. Isn't it just fabulous? I just love that. I love when these stories touch people that way. And the other thing is that I have an amazing scientist in my circle who is an incredible herbalist as well. And guess what she's done, folks? Oh, yeah. The tincture that I spoke about in the book, she has been able to fine-tune it and recreate it. And I'm going to tell you this, I've been doing the detox for like the last month. Oh my God. She did it. Eureka! She did it. So yeah, we are actually now in possession of the cat whiskers tincture that I just read to you about in the book. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I hope you have a very, very awesome day, and look forward to sharing more stories with you in the future. Peace out, y'all.